Okay, recording started. We're here. We're doing
All right.
it. Welcome back to another episode of the Painfully Honest Tech Podcast. I haven't done this for like 2 years or something. We've suddenly got a new co-host, and I live in a different city, and all kinds of things are crazy and different. So let's just jump right in and introduce this new guy, Jason Nellis. We've got two Jasons.
It's
The price of one.
I do think we have to rename the podcast The Painfully Honest Jasons. I think that's the only way for this to work.
You might be right. I mean, it's not every day that you get two Jasons together. And I mean, I think of you as like the slightly better looking younger version of me. So
I got to be honest with you. I think that your generosity there is, while appreciated, unfounded. I think
it's a low bar.
I use a lot more product in my hair, I think, is the only difference.
Yeah, I haven't used product in my hair for many years. I've got a whole anti-hygiene program that I go through that gets me this look.
Yeah, that might be the one big difference. I like showering. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
Anyway,
I'm lucky if I get 2 showers a week. So anyway, we
smell
are
it through here.
Yeah, we could. Yes, this is Smello Podcast. So we've got video going. If you're watching this on YouTube, you are seeing us, and then we've got audio going. If you're listening to us on audio, you can always come and hang out with us and watch this video podcast on the YouTubes. Right now, we're doing it recorded and then uploaded, but maybe we'll do it live someday. Maybe we'll do it live.
I'm in. Let's do it.
Yeah. So be sure to like and subscribe and then like go to Apple Music or podcasts and press buttons and leave reviews and all those kinds of things. And if you want to find me, you can find me on Twitter at Jason T. Lewis. You can find me on YouTube, Painfully Honest Tech, and Jason can be found on the Twitter at Jason Nellis.
In fact, you can find me everywhere at Jason Nellis. I've managed to lock that name down for years.
That's good. See, I was slow on some fronts. So
it's all right.
I'm old.
You know what?
Took me some time.
It's not that you're slow. You're just moving at an acceptable pace.
That's right. So we got a lot of stuff that we want to talk about today. We talk about some Prime Day, maybe some of this Threads versus Twitter nastiness that's going on. Apple Vision Pros out there. We got the Pixel Fold. We got the Galaxy Fold 5 coming. We've got iOS 17 beta released yesterday, as well as this Nothing phone too. So we got a lot of stuff that we're going to try and cover. Maybe we'll get to all of it. And then a little Can You Trust, perhaps, at the end. We've got an idea for Can You Trust. But first off, let's move into this Prime Day today. Yesterday and the day before were Prime Day.
Yes.
Did you acquire anything on the Prime?
I got to be honest with you. I looked at every monitor in existence. I looked at a new dock from my laptop. I looked at 15 different mechanical keyboards, and I did not pull the trigger on anything. But I'd like to share with you why, if you're interested.
Oh, yes, please.
Well, what I discovered more than anything else was that the things that had the deep discounts were items I was not interested in. They were from brands that I didn't recognize. They were from manufacturers that did not have strong reviews on a lot of their stuff. And where there were discounts on items that I was interested in, they were still incredibly expensive. And so I think one of the things that really frustrates me about Prime Day in general, first of all, the fact that we have now Prime Days, right? It's now just essentially a spring sale.
There's pre-Prime Day deals. It starts like last week.
They're priming Prime Day is what's happening.
They have to prime the pump for Prime Day.
There you go.
Yeah.
My frustration is that the deals aren't actually that much better than they are at any other given time, right? You're going to see the same level of deals when it comes to the holidays or around Memorial Day, President's Day, those kinds of timing. It's a phenomenal marketing exercise for Amazon. And I really appreciate how well oiled the machine is of promoting Prime Day, and even other creators who go live for hours at a time, deal hunting and finding good deals. And there are some good deals, but nothing that motivated me to pull the trigger on anything.
Yeah, this was the first Prime Day where in the last probably 3 or 4 years that I haven't worked for Amazon. And And so that usually I would be live on Prime Day at least 2 or 3 times, and trying to get people interested in the things. There were some good deals. I saw that the my favorite headphone, the Sennheiser HD 600,
Mm.
was on sale for, it's usually $459 sticker price. It's usually cheaper than that, but that's the regular sticker price. And I think it was going for $238 yesterday.
See, that's a good
So
deal.
yeah, that was the only deal that I tweeted out, was that, because it's just a really good deal. But Prime Day is interesting. I mean, Amazon has somehow successfully created their own Black Friday, and
Absolutely.
I think it's great. But you're right. I mean, I was looking at monitors and other stuff too, and Best Buy has just basically said, okay, they're doing it, we're going to do it too. So
Mhm.
Best Buy had some pretty decent deals on stuff as well. So I was looking at stuff that was available at Best Buy. I was looking at stuff that was available for on sale at Amazon, and I had a similar experience where it was just like, well, I was looking at another monitor, and like a new Samsung OLED monitor. I want to try one of these OLED monitors, and the LG has a really good 45-inch one
Mm.
that's normally $1,700, and it was marked down to $1,300, and I was like, ooh. But then I thought, that's still $1,300.
That's the thing. Like, when I was younger, one of my things that my friends and I would do on Black Friday is we never waited in line, but we would go to Best Buy after we'd woken up that Friday morning and just see what the deals were. And there were still valuable deals on TVs and printers and accessories and all the tech that you might need and or want. And I feel like Prime Day started as that kind of an experience, that it really was a deep markdown, move the volume kind of opportunity for consumers to really get their hands on stuff that really was marked down and really build more value in the ecosystem broadly. But I think now it's just a staple in the promotional cycle of Amazon, which is fine. Best Buy copying them demonstrates it's become a thing now for real. And I'm sure Walmart probably did something similar.
Yeah.
I just didn't feel motivated, and I had a budget. I was ready to spend some real money on some ideas on some items. There we go. I
Yeah.
can't speak today.
Sorry.
But nothing moved me, and I was kind of bummed by that. I just felt like, if I was going to buy an ultra wide monitor, which I've really thought about for a while, yesterday was going to be the day, and I just did not find something that made me want to do it.
Yeah. I think that for me, it was partially that, and partially the idea that, well, if I spend my money like now, then maybe I'll see a better deal later on in the day. And but the reality of it is, I don't need anything.
Right.
And I mean, that's
Right.
always been my problem, is I've got tons and tons of stuff, and I don't need any more stuff. So I'm trying to be better about that. I mean, I'm sitting here like, I can't even, like, in my mind, add up how much like this L-shaped desk worth of gear that I have is worth, and so to add more to it, so I'm trying to cut that back. And I think that one thing about Prime Day, and I don't know if it's a reaction, like if it's a product of Amazon being so much a staple during the pandemic for a lot of people, or what, but it kind of feels like we've moved into more of a consumer world.
Mm.
Whereas, when we're talking about Black Friday and stuff, it used to be Black Friday was about, you had to get the hot toy, so you had to be there early in the morning for your kids, or the blowout Chinese television that was going for $100. Those were the things. Those were things like people couldn't afford, like an expensive TV. So here they go, and now it just seems like an excuse to spend money. But
Well, I have to say, I do think that we would be remiss if we didn't recognize that part of the reason that this is probably the way it is that the pandemic shifted so much spending online for the last few years, and that Prime Days before, you can see the numbers. I'm sure Amazon has shared them somewhere. I can't think of exactly where to reference them, but I've seen the e-com sales, skyrocketed for 2020 and 2021, and they've settled back down to what was the normal growth curve for what
yeah,
would have happened had the pandemic never happened. So you've had a couple of years where tech companies, um, you know, overestimated how much more interest there was going to be. And by extension, they, you know, based some of the discounts in part on what they thought the volume might be post-pandemic, still being at similar levels. And so
Right.
I'd be curious to find out. I'm sure Amazon will announce this is the greatest Amazon, it's the greatest Prime Day ever. And, we sold so much more volume, but internally I'd be curious to see if it met or didn't meet expectations given prior year's performance.
Yeah. Well, and I know from just, being the tech, doing the tech YouTube thing, and seeing views fluctuate and happen in different areas of, some of my friends did incredibly well during the pandemic, and then their numbers have come back down, and then the shortage of silicon and everything like that it's been more of a rocky post-pandemic than it was pandemic. And I think when the pandemic started, I thought it was going to be the opposite way around. I
Yeah.
thought people were going to struggle for money. They weren't able to go to work. I didn't anticipate work from home being as much a big deal as it was, and I think that drove a lot of tech sales. But now people got money from their job, or they just like got out the credit card and upgraded their tech during the pandemic. And now these aren't people like the tech heads that we interact with a lot, who are buying a new computer every 1 or 2 years or something like that. They got their stuff. They're going to use it until they need to get something else.
Right.
And so we're
Well,
seeing a really big sort of depression in demand for that stuff. I think Apple is the only one that's somewhat depression proof. I saw a number that Samsung's mobile sales were down by 96% in Q2.
that
That's
mobile phones or just mobile
for their
technology broadly?
electronics division. I think it was
Okay.
Samsung Electronics. So it was,
Okay.
yeah, which I know Samsung is split up into different companies, and so that means that very few people are out. But Samsung does TVs, Samsung does phones, and so it's a bit that's a big number.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think, it's hard to compare it to Apple, who is approaching the $3 trillion, market cap level, which is
Yeah.
a whole other, hashtag eat the rich.
Yeah.
But I think, the one button I would put on this is that Prime Day is a great example of, something that we used to think of as being a real opportunity that has now become kind of mundane.
Yeah.
And, it's always going to be there. And I'm not surprised that it's going to remain. I just wish it was a little bit more enticing. And I wish the discounts were bigger, because I just don't like paying as much. But more importantly, I wish there was something more exciting to latch onto
Right.
than what we got.
Yeah, no, I that's a good point. I think it's definitely a very interesting how it's evolved has been very interesting. But now speaking of evolution, we've got Twitter has been a place where people have gone to get their news or get their interaction with the people that they know and love, or anything like, or to just go crazy and say nasty things. And I don't think there's any denying that since Elon Musk purchased Twitter, that it has changed significantly in just the overall demeanor of Twitter, right? Some people aren't too happy about it, and it definitely feels different. I use Twitter for my business stuff, and so I'm still there. But last week, was it last week or the week before? Last week, all of a sudden, Meta, connected with Instagram, throws out their own Twitter competitor, Threads. And Threads was very interesting. I mean, it was just kind of like a black and white Twitter, basically, without as many features at this point. But the adoption rate of Threads was pretty incredible. They announced 100 million users signed up for Threads, and I think that Twitter only has a few 100 million active users, and that's after being around for a decade plus.
Yeah.
So they got 100. Now I think the way that they got those 100 million registered users is a little bit misleading. But
Okay, so I have to preface this because it legally I'm required to. I used to work at Meta. I
yes.
no longer work at Meta. None of the things I'm about to say represent the company's position. I have no inside knowledge on Threads. I was not part of that team, nor was I there when this was in progress. Having said all of that, I think it's pretty smart. I think Threads would never have taken off. I mean, we've seen Twitter clones that have come out already. We've seen Mastodon try to make a moment out of it. We've seen Spoutable. We've seen, even Blue Sky from Jack. Suddenly that's going to be the new thing. We all were vying for invites to that. I actually think the fact that it was as simple as it was from the get-go, and the fact that it was so easy to feel like you had an immediate audience vis-a-vis porting your Instagram followers over is exactly what made it brilliant and special. And the truth is, I wish I could tell you that I had some criticism of my former employer to be like, well, if I'd been there, I'd have done it differently. The truth is, I actually think they really nailed it. I think the user experience is simple. I wish that they'd added a few more features at launch. I genuinely don't think they thought it was going to take off as quickly as it did. But again, I have no inside knowledge of that. It just seems from the outside that like everybody's just like, oh yeah, we'll absolutely give you different kinds of feeds. And yes, we'll make it easier to search. I just think this is a rare instance of seeing an opportunity and being able to actually execute on it well, which when you look at what happened with Mastodon and Blue Sky and Spoutable and others, tells you what it was going to take to really build a new Twitter competitor. You have to find a way to port your audience so that you don't feel like you're screaming into the void like every other social network is now.
Yeah, no, it was very interesting. I mean, I remember going over there pretty, the folks that I follow on Twitter, the tech folks, they were all like running over there immediately. And so all I saw on that day was my feed filled with like, I'm on Threads. And, and so I went over, and the first thing they had you do was like, they gave you the opportunity to just take all of your followers from Instagram. And I don't really do Instagram all that much, so I didn't have a big number, but still by the end of last week, I had like 250 Threads followers. And I think I've only threaded 2 or 3 times.
Yeah. Can we talk about the terminology? Is it going to be we threaded?
I don't
we
know.
Posted?
Yeah. I don't know how we verbify threads. I don't know.
I think given its threading, I needled my fans. No, that can't be right.
I stringed. I strung. I don't know. I don't know.
I stranged. Nope, that's wrong too.
It's going to be interesting. Part of me thinks, wow, this has a real chance, and for all the reasons that you just said. But another part of me thinks we've been here before.
Sure.
With Twitter has, like Facebook, has had enough of a time to lay a foundation and an infrastructure that seems it seems like it would be really hard to topple that infrastructure and get people to adopt a new service. But people have been very unhappy. I think this is the perfect storm. Elon Musk, no matter how you feel about him, he came over to Twitter. He paid $400 billion.
It's $44 billion.
$44 billion. Yeah. And last I heard, it had been devalued by quite a bit.
By I think $43 billion, I'm sure at this point.
Yeah. And so he's really taken a much more hands-on approach to managing that company, to being a presence on the platform, to almost antagonistically go on and have his agenda is very visible. And I think it's just, people like to go on, my estimation is people like to go on Twitter. They like to interact with the people that they interact with. They like for it to be short, sweet, and not hopefully non-confrontational. And if that's what you're into, although you can certainly find plenty of drama on any social media platform. And I think that the tenor of Twitter has changed significantly, and a lot of people have been very unhappy about it, and they don't often agree with the politics that's being pushed. And So a lot of people have left or wanted to leave. So maybe this is the thing that takes over. But it just seems like such a monumental task. To,
I hear you. I think, there were always the parts of Twitter and every social network that were, racist, misogynistic,
yeah,
anti-Semitic, violent. I think the real challenge here is that unlike places at, unlike other social media platforms, which there are trust and safety teams who are, constantly trying to stamp this stuff out. And there are mandates from the top, the top of the pyramid to work on making this a safe environment for users and advertisers. Elon came in, he turned it into his personal playground. He has a very specific agenda, as you said, and he's turned it into what he envisions the internet should look like. And I think, you know, part of it is also that we've disintermediated social media from what it used to be 10 years ago. There are no singular places we all agree to be on. There's no, you
right,
moved from Facebook to Twitter to Instagram, then there was Snapchat, and then there was YouTube and its, social aspects. And now we just live in a place where there are just so many social media networks. You do have to pick and choose a little bit. So I do think
right.
that part of it is that time moved on and we all moved on. But Threads came in at a time where it was very clear that what people were craving was safety again. Even the idea that, a Facebook run a Facebook run safety team, which I know for some people they have a challenge with, and I think there's certainly a lot you can say about Meta's long-term track record on safety and security. But the truth is that they do a much better job of it than Twitter does right now, because they basically don't have a trust and safety team at the moment.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I mean, I think the free speech aspect of Elon's platform, uh, both his sort of political platform as well as the platform of Twitter now, which sort of mirrors that, is an interesting thought experiment. And it does sort of ask the questions about, well, what is free speech when you balance it against safety and liability and all these other things. um, you're asking, maybe if it was a much smaller platform, a more free speech would be possible. But when you start looking at YouTube, I mean, they had to deal with this several years ago, with some of their bigger creators doing things that made them very non-advertiser friendly. And the fact of the matter is, it's a free service that you get to use, so you can't complain really about them wanting to court advertising. So it's kind of one of those things. People make their living on YouTube now, and people
Yeah.
make their living on social media all over the place. And so it is a place that needs to have a little bit more of an agreed upon code of conduct, even if even if it's just something, like something almost biblical, like thou shall not, whatever, and just say, okay, so these are the places that we don't go. But some people don't want to have that kind of box put around them.
I I think when you frame it as a box, people want to break out of it. And I think that's fair. But the truth is, Elon was a supposed free speech, First Amendment advocate, but the First Amendment doesn't. Freedom of speech is not freedom from consequence. And the First Amendment covers that you have the ability to say stuff such that the government won't retaliate, but that has nothing to do with how other people in private enterprise can respond to what you say. And I think part of what frustrated me about his takeover was that almost immediately there was this declaration of, the silliness that comedy is now legal again on Twitter, and immediately started shutting down people who were impersonating him because it made him feel bad. Or
Yeah,
the time that he made everybody see all of his tweets, regardless of whether they were even following him.
right.
Or, the 50 other examples that you can think of where, he says something out of one side of his mouth and it ends up being very different out the other. And so I think what we're really seeing is just somebody with an obscene amount of money who bought themselves a playground, who didn't like what the rules were before, and has now turned it into kind of a nasty place. And,
Yeah.
it was easier to ignore the parts of Twitter that you didn't like because, I can't begin to share the number of times that I was like, oh, that's a misogynistic tweet, I'm going to share that. Oh, that guy got banned eventually. That's really good. I'm glad that they tracked that. None of that exists anymore. None of that it might have been whack-a-mole, but at least you felt like you were doing something and that they were doing something. And now it doesn't exist anymore. And so there's no point in subjecting yourself to an experience like that if the value is going to constantly diminish, not only by other people leaving that platform, but by you not being able to say what you want. And that my freedom of speech is now threatened, because the consequences are I could get doxxed, I could get tracked down, I could get, harassed, or even have violence made against me because of what's happening on Twitter. The stakes feel too high to make it feel valuable anymore. So when a place like Threads comes up, it's safe, it's contained, there's a team behind it that wants to proactively solve these problems. They may not get it right all the time, but they're trying. That's enticing.
Yeah, I mean, when you go back to the First Amendment thing, just taking out the privately owned company aspect of it, which sort of negates that. Free speech is only protected when it doesn't infringe upon the rights of others, right? I mean, that's what it says, and you can interpret that in a bunch of different ways. But I think Twitter is, has been pushing the boundaries of that, and so yeah, it's going to be interesting to see where Threads goes, because if it becomes, after the gold rush of everybody running over there, is it still going to continue to percolate, or will it slow down to a crawl and people reluctantly go back to where they came from? I mean, in this day and age, social media platforms were somewhat accidental in how they became popular and how they integrated themselves into our lives. And so now trying to reverse engineer that phenomenon has to be very challenging. And I mean, Facebook certainly has the experience and the wherewithal to do that, but it's going to be very, very interesting to see if Threads, if the emperor is wearing new clothes, or I'm trying to make stupid clothing references because
it's good. I like it. As two of the most fashionable men on the internet, I feel like that's appropriate for us. No, that is not true.
Exactly. Yeah. Speaking of fashion, though, let's talk Apple Vision Pro, because this has been a hot topic as well since Apple announced the Vision Pro, and there are so many hot takes on Vision Pro, and I always love it when they're in the tech community has like multiple hot takes on something that they have never touched and won't touch for 6 or 8 months from now. So Apple Vision Pro, for me, when I saw the presentation of it, I was like, oh, my brain exploded, and I thought, this is like the iPhone before it, like the iPod before that. This is Apple yet again potentially introducing a paradigm shift in how we interact with our technology. And to me, that was the potential of it. Like what I saw, what I extrapolated from that was so paradigm shifting in how we interact with all of our stuff, because Apple's got the ecosystem, right? Apple TV, iPhone, Mac, iPad, all of the things that you use to consume all of that stuff, not to mention things that it will do that other things don't do. Suddenly, all of it happens on your face, and a lot of people are like, "Well, nobody's going to wear that on their face all the time." Well, it's going to be even more. It's going to be even more. It'll make people even more cut off from the world. Who knows? And then the whole idea of, well, we've had VR since the 70s and VR hasn't worked. My comeback on that is that we've had VR, but in its infancy, it was proof of concept, right? That it could be done. And then over the past 10 years, we've seen VR technology grow. We've seen Meta buy Oculus, and then come with the Quest and the Quest 2, and now they're coming with the Quest 3 later on this year. But if I'm Meta right now and I've got the Quest 3 queued up to go into production, and I watch that Apple Vision Pro presentation, I'm crapping my pants because the Quest 3 has a lot of is an improvement over the Quest 2. And in any other time period, that iterative jump would be great. It's going to look better. It's got a lot of different features that the Quest 2 didn't have, and it's going to have lower prices, higher resolution, better performance, all of the things that you would expect from an iterative generational thing. But it doesn't have the eye tracking of the Quest Pro, right? And the eye tracking and all of that with the Vision Pro is, I think, going to be the secret sauce that makes the Vision Pro run in a way that no other VR, AR, XR, whatever you want to call it, has been able to do. And so it's just, I'm very excited for it. People complain about the price, $3,500. To me, that is a lot of money. I'm not going to say that it's not, but I've spent $3,500 on a MacBook.
Yeah.
And that's an integral thing to my life. It's an early adopter price. There are going to be growing pains for the people who spend that money. There's going to be, in 5 to 10 years, you'll be able to get, just like you can get an iPhone SE now, you'll be able to get a Vision right. SE, right? And it'll be, last generation's processor and a little bit less fancy. But to me, $3,500. If you think about it this way, the Apple Lisa was, I think, about $4,000 new, or $10,000. No, it was $10,000 new. $10,000 when it first came out. And the Apple Lisa was the first computer to ship with a WYSIWYG, what you see is what you get UI, right? With a mouse and all that kind of stuff. That stuff existed before, but this was the first major product that had it as part of the operating system. The Macintosh came in later, and there's a whole history of the Lisa versus the Mac and Steve Jobs and his history at that company. But the Lisa was $10,000 in 1982 money. And that equates to about $45,000 in 2023 money.
A car.
Yeah.
You're buying a car.
A nice car, a really nice car, pretty much. So I think that you have to take these things you have to take them in a context of what the thing is, because the people who are mad about the price, I think, are people who know they won't be able to buy it. And I don't mean that in like kind of a harsh way. I just mean it's a price that is exclusionary by necessity, only because I can't imagine the R&D cost for this, for the hardware, for the software. We're talking a whole new operating system running the M2 chip. I mean, you're going to have a computer on your face that you can interact with your eyeballs and your hands in space with no controllers.
Yeah.
We've not seen this before. No VR, no AR, no nothing has come close to the potential of Vision Pro.
So, a couple of thoughts. First of all, we should have put a banner at the beginning of this that we're going to talk about Meta, and Jason doesn't work there anymore, but that's okay. I'm going to focus actually more exclusively on the Apple side of this, which is to say, this is a tried and true Apple, directive. We build the first iteration of a technology. It's going to be expensive and it's not going to do everything that you want it to do, but we're going to show you what it can do. This is exactly the way it was with the iPod. It's how it was with the iPhone. It's how it was, you said, the Lisa. I would even point to, even things like the HomePod, which have not taken off, but the concept around both the voice integration as well as the better sound quality, right? Where something that Apple, this is what Apple does. So the pricing notwithstanding, what I think is really smart about the go-to-market approach for the Vision is just how focused on entertainment it is, and focused on, interactivity and what will eventually be gaming, but more than that, aesthetically pleasing. And leading up to, I think, less the approach of productivity that you've seen from other companies, and instead really just about taking the thing that you love about Apple products, which is how simple it is to enjoy the things that you love and to make it just work. And the fact that it's going to not only just work, but it's going to just work in a way that is much closer to what I think most is in most people's mind when they think about VR now, which is Ready Player One, right?
Right.
It's you're not going to be the avatar. We're not talking about the multiple worlds. Oh, I'm going to go live on World of Warcraft world. Azeroth. There we go. That took me a
Yeah.
second.
Yeah.
But it shows you how little MMOs I've played over the years. But
Hey,
I do think that it's a really brilliant step one,
right.
with them knowing it's not about step one, it's about step 8. Because by the time the 6th or 8th iteration of this headset comes out and we have multiple models and we have much more price conscious versions, and the processing power with the M chips has improved dramatically over the next few versions, that's when they're going to go from a $3 trillion company to a $5 trillion company, because it's going to be that level of integration with other products, that seamless experience, and that, sort of assumed cost now, the same we all just like, well, it's $2,000 for my new laptop. That's just what it's going to be.
Right.
It's, it'll be 3 or 4 grand again, but we're like, well, I need to be able to really feel like I'm in the Mission Impossible movie. I guess I'm spending 4 grand on this now, and that'll be normalized. And I think
Yeah.
it'll be a much more, I think it will not only drive the larger metaverse conversation much more quickly. I think it will also normalize people wearing headsets in a way that everybody now looks at and goes, well, that's ridiculous. When the iPad came out, everybody thought it was ridiculous to have this tablet. What am I going to do with this thing? It's huge and it doesn't connect to my phone, and it's ridiculous. I don't need, who needs that? And then, 3 versions later, it's like, what do you mean you don't have an iPad? That's ridiculous. So
Yeah. Yeah. And now you can get an iPad, like a 10.2-inch iPad, for $330. And
yeah, I you can't see it in the current shot, but I've got my other rig set up with a teleprompter, and I've actually been considering looking for a 10.2-inch specifically to make it easier for me to use on my prompter. But that also tells you, like, there's 15 other tablets out there that could do that. I think of the iPad because it's the easiest, it's integrated into the environment. Why would I get anything else?
yeah.
Headsets are going to be the same way. It's going to be like, well, everything else is on my iCloud account. Like, it's just, not only is it better, it's easier.
Well, and that's the thing. I mean, I remember when the iPad came out and then Android versions of tablets started to come out. And yeah, you could get an Android tablet for $100, but you were buying a piece of plastic with a couple of LCD layers in there. It was off. It was awful, and Android was never optimized right for the whole thing. And iPads very quickly became not just lifestyle devices, but for a lot of people, there were professional apps on there. It made and very well made apps that integrated themselves into people's work lives and that kind of thing. And so the iPad just became a really great ancillary device to the life that you lived on your iPad, right? Or on your iPhone. And it, that was really the beginning in my mind, the beginning of the ecosystem as we know it now. Now we have the Apple Watch, we've got the AirPods, we've got all this different stuff, not to mention Apple TV, la da 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 da. I mean, have you ever put on an Apple TV and you've got your AirPods and you take them out of the case and your Apple TV says, "Hey, you've got AirPods. Do you want to use them?" I mean,
I just love the fact that these things seamlessly integrate with everything. So when I just pick up my phone to, I want to watch something on TikTok real quick, I don't even have to think about it. The AirPods automatically move over.
Yeah.
When you talk about that kind of a seamless switch over, a thoughtless kind of, you can say what you will about how Apple products integrate, and I still have issues. I still sometimes take out the AirPods and I only get sound out of the one side. Like, it's not as if it's perfect,
right.
but it's pretty good 95% of the time.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I think what's ultimately happening is Samsung is trying to come up with they have their own ecosystem. It has its own sort of advantages. Samsung Dex, I think, is a good idea, but that hasn't really taken off for the mainstream. And now Google with the Pixel and now the Pixel Fold and the Google Hubs and assistants that you can put around your house. My whole house, when we moved into this house, there was already a Nest thermostat, 2 doorbells, a camera out back, three Nest Protect thingies, and I will say this: they're all very good, but they aren't as easy to set up and use and integrate into your life as an Apple version of that thing. It's interesting to me that Apple just stayed out of the home, like the home smart things market.
I mean,
They've become, they do the hubs, the Apple TV is a hub, the HomePod is a hub, and it can work with the other things that have HomeKit support, but they haven't made a doorbell. They haven't made, cameras. They haven't done any of that stuff, which is an interesting choice. Because I think as that stuff becomes more and more popular and ubiquitous, Apple might change their mind. I don't know. But the Vision Pro, like, I've always thought that the iPhone was sort of like a stone tablet in terms of a connectivity device. It's become very, very polished, and they're very, very good devices. But I've always thought that the next step was your Apple Watch. And now that we're talking about Vision Pro, I can see 10 years down the line, the Apple Watch being the brains of a pair of glasses or contact lenses that can then do what the Vision Pro does in a much less intrusive way. And maybe you don't get the full functionality if you use glasses or contacts or something like that. There were already, I went to CES 2020, and there were already AR contact lenses being shown off at that show. So it's really quite possible that Apple has introduced what is the paradigm shift. I'm a huge William Gibson fan, and so Ready Player One is, the book and the film are much more palatable, consumable versions of Mona Lisa Overdrive and Neuromancer and those books that, I mean, William Gibson came up with the idea for a cyberpunk. He came up with, the idea of, he named so many things like the internet, and he came up with words for fictional things that he was creating in his novels that then became the things that we talk about. And this VR AR situation is another one of those things. So I always thought the most interesting part of Ready Player One was the fact that the economy and natural disasters and those kinds of things had sort of made it so it was no longer feasible for public schools to exist and for infrastructure of that kind to happen. And so people went to school in that headset. People interacted with other people in that headset. People watched their shows or did their exercise or whatever in that headset. And I don't think that's something. I think that's something that quite possibly, looking at how we treat public education in the United States, looking at how infrastructure is going, looking at how so much of what we have taken for granted over the past 50 years or more, as it degrades and we fight over things that are not as important as quality of life, it wouldn't surprise me to see public schools fail, and and for our kids to homeschool in a VR headset.
I love how this conversation went from like, oh, Apple's innovating in this new space to like just the complete collapse of society and we're all going to retreat to our headsets. I can see the arc. I'm just saying, I see where we got here.
This is the way I think. Okay.
And don't get me wrong, it's a compelling direction, but let me just pause, and on behalf of all of our listeners, is everything okay?
Yeah. It's
okay.
I also think up scenarios for like the apocalypse, like what are my first 3 moves? So we'll get into that another time.
I just want to point out, this is the first episode in 2 years, and don't get me wrong, that is a painfully honest opinion, but that is a bold strategy for our first recording. I like it. I'm in.
Hey, I do what I can. I do what I can.
And you're nailing it. No question. Let me be clear.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, in more present news,
indeed,
it's kind of a downtime for tech right now. We're in this sort of nascent period before Techtober and the fall and all that kind of stuff ramps up. So there's not really a lot going on, but in that space we have the Pixel Fold, which I have to admit was a device that I thought would never exist. They announced it, they showed it to people. I thought Google can't find their ass with two hands. They are not going to be able to pull this off, right? But somehow they've got it to the people who pre-ordered, and it's for sale in other countries. I know it's for sale in the UK right now, but it's pre-order in the United States, goes live on the 18th of this month, so next week. And it's $1,800. That's the headline for me. Pixel Fold looks cool, $1,800. And I just, knowing Google's, I mean, there's a website dedicated to the products that Google has abandoned, right? And the list is not short. So Google is not the company that I want to invest my $1,800 in a foldable phone with until they prove that it's a real thing, until it gets in the hands of a lot of people. And yeah, I mean, we've got the Galaxy Z Fold 5 coming, and that's the 5th generation of Samsung's foldable, right? But let me ask you this. Do you desire a foldable phone?
No. I have, I got a real definitive answer there. So our friend Michael Fisher, yes, Captain Two Phones, Mr. Mobile, depending on
how
you
call himself, Captain Foldable Phones.
You know what I call him? Mr. Fisher, as we all should. Yes. He's been a champion of foldable technology since it came out. I really do think that there are applications to the glass and the kind of multi-dimensional wearables that represents. I myself do not feel particularly strongly about foldable phones. And I actually think you bring up a point I want to dovetail with one of the other things we were going to talk about on today's episode, which is, can you trust Google? Let me just say this right here. Let me be the guy who says it, because I never worked at Google. I don't have the same complication as my prior employer. I think I have trouble trusting that Google is doing this because they feel that this is the future of technology versus seeing just an opportunity in the market. I think that foldable technology has some interesting applications. I think for phones, it's nice to have the split screens. And I think that for the comfort of having a phone that is larger, at being able to fold and put it in your pocket is one of convenience. I think an $1,800 price point is ridiculous. Yeah. And I think that when you talk about a company that purports to be on the cutting edge and you see this as being the thing they're pushing for mobile phones, I think it's a cry for help. I don't think it represents a serious threat, in my opinion, to somebody like Apple, who has, tremendous domination in the mobile market. I think that foldable is, again, we're looking for the next great leap of mobile technology. And I think a lot of people thought foldable might be it because of some of the opportunities it presents with split screen and, comfort and function. But it hasn't proven to me yet that it is the next great leap. It is a nice adjustment, and that's as far as it goes, and does not justify that price point.
No, it doesn't. And in fact, I mean, the Galaxy Fold line, it hits that price point. Samsung does a much better job of discounting and giving you trade-in values that are completely out of line with what it should be, and just wanting you to get the phone, and they want to get the phone in people's hands. So I got my Galaxy Fold 4 last year, and I think instead of $1,950, it was $800. After I traded in a phone. Right. So it was. But to me, and I said this from the get-go about the foldable phones, cool trick.
Yeah.
The Galaxy Fold got more interesting to me with S Pen support, but it never seemed to me like the paradigm shift that everybody wanted it to be. That we're going away from slab and we're going into foldable. I mean, to me, it was going backwards. The Motorola Razr was a foldable phone. And now they have, but it was a clamshell with a little screen and some buttons, right? Now we have the Motorola Razr, but it has two screens and one of them happens to fold.
Yeah, and I think, sorry, go ahead, please.
Well, and to me, like, it introduces failure points that don't need to be there. it gives you in my usage, foldable phones gave me less of a satisfactory user experience because of how unwieldy they were, right? And so I think the Galaxy Fold has entrenched itself in the zeitgeist. The Pixel Fold, we don't know. Can you trust Google? I mean, survey says no, because they've canceled everything that people thought was cool. I mean, imagine if they'd been working on Google Glass from whenever they canceled it to now. I mean, we might be talking about Google Vision Pro as opposed to Apple Vision Pro. I mean, the same thing goes for Microsoft and HoloLens, but that's another thing. Um, here's what I think happens
Yeah.
in my and your group of friends and sort of this world of tech enthusiasm, whether you're on the selling end or the buying end or the talk about it end. It becomes an echo chamber, right?
Yeah.
And so on my Twitter feed, I see all of these people getting the Pixel Fold, and I get the FOMO. And then I realized that I think in the 5 years that the Galaxy Fold has existed, now I live in Iowa, so it's, not
It's
it's
the center of culture.
yes,
Yes.
of course, or center of corn. Um,
Bold
it's
strategy.
not
All
edible
right.
corn either. It's feed corn.
Right.
So I don't get it. Anyway, I think I've maybe seen, and I don't travel a lot. I think I've maybe seen a foldable phone in the wild like 2 or 3 times.
Yeah.
And I know that they sold something like 11 million folds. Samsung did, or somebody gave me that number the other day. I don't know how true it is, but yeah, I don't think that the Pixel Fold. I think that once it gets into the hands of a lot of people, much like the Galaxy Fold did when they sent it to reviewers, and people were like, "Am I supposed to peel this off?" And broke the phone.
Yeah.
It will be interesting to see exactly how sturdy that phone is. Um, but I don't. If you think about the Pixel's market share in North America, I mean, Google has done Team Pixel, where they sent phones out to every YouTuber they could possibly get a hold of. They did kick me out of the program after I said not so nice things. But everybody else gets, so they've done that. They wanted to get people talking about the Pixels.
Yeah.
And it worked, because whereas they didn't have any market share, they now have a minuscule, like 1 or 2%. I haven't seen the numbers recently. And Apple has the lion's share, and Samsung comes in a decent second, right? But there's no other competition in the smartphone market in North America. I know it's different elsewhere in the world, but it's not competition. LG left the smartphone game entirely, and they were the number 3 market share company in the United States at 10% of the market, and they couldn't make money. So they left. So what's Google going to do? They're eating this money, and they've got plenty of it, I guess. But
Well, and I think that's the differentiator, because I think that, one of the things to remember is Google, unlike an LG, has so much money and is getting so, I mean, they are growing year over year where they can afford to wait it out. And I do think if there is a part of Google, if, the vast intricacy of that organization, there is somebody who really strongly believes that foldable is more than a fad, and that they're priming the pump for a larger deliverable to the market. More power to them. What we see right now, and I hear you on the FOMO side, like anytime anybody gets a new video game device, or say, the feelings are real of like, I want it too. But with foldables, I have to confess, I've never felt that way, because I don't really appreciate what it offers me that a slab device doesn't. And the truth is, the only thing I see is that it folds into my pocket a little bit more easily. And that's fine, but that's not enough for me to feel like I've got, an extra $800 in my pocket that's worth spending.
Yeah.
Ecosystems notwithstanding, because that's another challenge for me too.
Well, for me, like, even though it folds in half, the Galaxy Flip gets smaller. The Motorola Razr is a reasonable amount, but
yeah,
when you're talking the Pixel Fold, which is gigantic,
right,
and even the Galaxy Fold is really big. I mean, it's like putting 2 cans of Skull in your back pocket, right?
Okay, Skull is spitting tobacco for anybody, or chewing tobacco for anybody who doesn't know what that is.
A little pinch between the cheek and gum.
There you go. Here's my suggestion, and this is, I think, a good point for us to wrap this part of the conversation up. I propose you and I start a company where we make wearable clips for your belt, for your cell phone, sexy again. I think, I'm telling you,
was it ever sexy?
Well, we're going to make it sexy again because somebody must have found it sexy, because for a while there it was a thing. But I'm telling you, like, little like $50 piece attaches to your belt, makes it super slick, and you get like the gingham I'm wearing on our recording right now. Like, this is a dad match in heaven. Just
very wholesome. Yeah. Yep. Well, I thought that you had to have an AARP membership card to get the belt holster for your phone.
I know people. We can make that happen. Just saying.
Yeah. It's the sad thing is I'm getting mail from AARP now. You can join at 55.
Hot tamale.
Oh, so sad. But yeah, we'll have to percolate on making the belt clip sexy for the first time.
We'll think about it.
Yeah. But otherwise, this has been the first episode of the Painfully Honest Tech Podcast 2.0 with myself, Jason T. Lewis, and my good friend Jason Nellis, the 2 Jasons of death, destruction. Like we're like the 2 horsemen of tech apocalypse. That's what I'm going to call us from now on. But thank you all for being here. Be sure to come visit me on Painfully Honest Tech there on the YouTubes, and come talk to me on the Twitters, and Jason as well, at Jason Nellis everywhere. I got a website too. I got some merchandise you can get. I made some t-shirts. I got my own t-shirt line now called Sad Iron Shirts, and they're fun. So come visit me and check all that out. But otherwise, we'll be back next week with yet another version of this epic performance. So thanks very much for being here. Once again, my name is Jason Lewis, sometimes known as the JTL, Painfully Honest Tech Podcast. Until the next time, we are out.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.